rolling.
We are rolling.
All right, today we are going to talk about drugs that enhance performance, i.e. performance-enhancing drugs. And
Heads.
I would like to take this chance to thank our sponsor, Killcliff. You will only test positive for awesome.
You already cracked it.
Well, it's because I was thirsty.
We don't get the dramatic effect.
You won't test positive for any banned substances, and also our good friends at Nike Weightlifting. You can Google Athlete Performance Solution if you would like, and check out their array of the Romaleos 2 and the Romaleo 3. So today we're going to talk about the performance-enhancing drugs. And first of all, when I asked this Dan, I said, hey, I want to do this thing where we talk about drugs. And he was like, nope, not a good idea.
I didn't say anything like that, actually.
That's exactly what
But
he
anyway, well, no, the reason I said that was because, and this is probably a good point to clarify, is that we're not here to be like the Homer Simpsons, where it's like, oh, you're better than me, you must be on steroids.
Correct.
Which I feel like is like the trap. That is like the bear trap of this conversation.
For sure.
Where it's always, let's talk about steroids and who we think or is or is not, using or has used or blah, 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 blah.
And we are not pro-drug guys. We have lots of friends in the industry that are. And guys that typically are not pro-drug, they don't talk about it because they don't want to see it be seen as somebody who endorses the use of drugs in sport. And we don't endorse it by any means, but we, as a sports performance coach, a exercise physiologist, a whatever you want to call it, you need to have a good understanding of what the shit is, how it works, why it works. And I kind of want to talk a little bit about some of the things I have witnessed firsthand and how it led to this curiosity of, okay, what are these drugs that people are doing? Why are they taking them? How does this affect them? Okay, so this has been a long process. I've been working in the industry, the biz, as we say.
The biz.
Forever.
The game for a while.
And I definitely have fulfilled just about every single role you can have in the health and fitness industry, including lead exercise physiologist at a cardiac rehab.
Did you ever get to master intern though?
Not there, but I got the position. I got the position based on default. I was the only one that had a exercise physiology undergraduate degree.
Did you show up with those glasses?
Nope, didn't have glasses yet, and that was that. But I also, prior to that, had worked in a gym as a front desk dude. I was a personal trainer at a Gold's Gym.
Here's your towel.
I worked in Bro Gym up in Chicago, and then I moved more towards the sports performance sector after trying to escape. I've talked about this before. Training purgatory, right? And then started working with some elite athletes in the collegiate setting and then the professional setting. So the point being is we or I or you, we have all seen a ton of drug use. And even if you haven't witnessed it firsthand, you know what this stuff is because of Balco and Lance Armstrong. Almost every single person has heard of performance-enhancing drugs. And that is probably where their research and their inquisitiveness stops. Okay, so I would like to share my two very first stories with performance-enhancing drugs.
Do tell.
I was 18.
Okay.
It was the summer between my freshman year of high school and my first year of college. I was personal training at a Gold's Gym, which for an 18-year-old who had seen the documentary Pumping Iron,
it was a big deal.
They were right where I needed to be.
Right.
And the dude, the bro that opened the gym there, was this super yoked up dude who always had the string tank top on with his nipples out, that sort of shit.
Super strange.
He one day asked me, basically just casual conversation, hey, when are you going to get on some tests? I was just like, what? Excuse me? And
You're not purple enough. Right
yeah, and this guy was not old by any means. Like he probably was my age, maybe 19. I don't know, but he threw a Twix on the counter and goes, "I will get more nutrition out of that Twix bar than you will in your 6 meals of chicken and rice all day." Right? And so I thought the guy was completely batshit crazy, so I kind of let it go. And then one day I witnessed him in a public place, the gym, inject himself in the quad with some sort of testosterone. And I was like, this is crazy. And my first thought was, that's how it works. You jab yourself with this needle, and all of a sudden you're ready to lift like massive amounts of weights.
Yeah.
But I didn't really give it much thought. I just thought it was like, this is something I'm not into. This guy's he's a dipshit, and I just kind of moved on. Then I moved to the greatest university in the world, and there I started training with some dudes that were
We don't even need to say the name anymore.
We don't. Some serious, they were into some serious training, and these guys were like what I would consider hardcore. They were dedicated 5-6 days a week, big, strong dudes. I got to see like a 600-pound raw bench, like just like some crazy shit, right? But one day, this guy, I really liked him, super nice guy. He wasn't a dipshit at all. He was in there training. It was a leg day, and it was real hot. And I see him laying on the floor in a just cold sweat. And you know those like Bear bottles of honey?
Yes.
He had one of those Bear bottles, and he was just drinking an entire thing of honey. And I was like, blood sugar's a little low, but that's extreme. That's a lot of. I
mean, it is a superfood, so
right. So
it's gonna do a lot.
Anyway, when he kind of like got his wits, he said, "Oh man, I took too much insulin." And I was like, "What?" And lo and behold, this dude's injecting himself with growth hormone and insulin. And so there I was like, dude, this dude looked like he was about to die. I'm not sure if he's going to die. I'm going to go home and do some research and see if I can find out about insulin, growth hormone, testosterone.
Pull up the old Google.
And all that stuff. Okay. Google was just becoming a thing then. But fortunately for me, one, I was never like, both of those scenarios did not have me being like, oh, I think I'd like to do that. I just, the first guy was, and it's probably a good thing, the first guy was kind of a dipshit, and I just looked at him like he was a moron, and the second guy looked like he almost died. And he was not winning an IFBB pro card. He was not setting a world record deadlift. He was not competing at the highest levels of sport. He literally was working a 9-to-5 job, and he was training at the rec center. Like nothing really to be gained
it's pretty big
by
time.
messing with a potentially life-altering hormone.
Yeah, but
so,
I'm like, it is the rec center, Dan.
Right. So
you never know. Like I think my first like run-in with anything like that was like not quite as severe, but maybe like an over-the-counter was back when they had like the Stacker 2s back in the day in like the early 2000s, right? Which are pretty like a standard drug, right? And like I think we were running 40s. We were testing 40s in the winter, running down the hallway at school. That's where you did them. And I had a couple buddies that.
If you grew up in Indiana, damn straight you did. I did the same thing.
Right. I mean, you got a hallway. It's 40 yards. It's 6 degrees outside, and there's snow on the ground. Right. You're not going to go out on the track and run and go test your 40 time. You're not going to be very good. But like a couple guys get super jacked on Stacker 2s back when they had the good old ephedra back in it. Just get super hyped up. Your heart rate's all of a sudden 3,000, and you feel like you're gonna have a heart attack, but you run really fast. For a couple seconds.
Absolutely.
But then you feel like you're gonna die.
Trade off.
It's just what it is.
Oh, let me get this skeleton out of my closet just to spark this. I'm not 100% drug free. In case you guys don't remember Ripped Fuel, do you remember that shit? It was sold over the counter.
Right.
It literally had ephedra in it, and I was trying to get jacked. Super lean.
Why wouldn't you?
Took a handful, by handful I mean by 4 Ripped Fuel before my 7:30 a.m. trigonometry or calculus class, profusely sweating, thought I was going to black anyway. Okay, back on track here. Performance enhancing drugs. So fortunately for me, I was in a university program where I was interested in studying sports performance and biochemistry and biology and all those things that happen together. So in my basic level biology, they go over exactly what all the hormones in the body do, where they're secreted. This is where I fell in love with the inlets of Langerhans. I told you I was going to work that in.
You definitely
And
did.
that is essentially the beta cell in the pancreas that secretes insulin.
It's right next to the Shire.
And so I started getting a base understanding of insulin, growth hormone, testosterone, and all those things, and I could start to see why people would use them for sports performance capabilities and kind of some of the pitfalls of using them would be. I didn't later learn about EPO or erythropoietin until my advanced exercise physiology class, in which we actually talked about like doping cycles and how it affects athletes' performance. This was, and all this coincides with the Balco, Barry Bonds shit, the Lance Armstrong stuff. Like, it was all coming out, it was all coming to light that these guys were on all these drugs. And what we started to discuss in these advanced exercise physiology classes was, the negative side effects and how they actually affected performance. So, for example, you could take, Lance Armstrong, for say, could take testosterone, right? But if he was just taking testosterone and not paying any attention to the effect that it had on his body, that could raise his hematocrit, okay, which is already in jeopardy because of the EPO he's taking. So there has to be a serious control with the coaches he's working with to understand what he needs to do to make sure his blood doesn't turn to oil, which in general makes you die.
You don't want that.
And more people have died from EPO probably than any other performance enhancing drugs. Yeah, exactly, because the effects are relatively, compared to other drugs, relatively immediate, right? Like, you can really start getting into serious complications. And so what we were discussing was that it wasn't the fact that Lance Armstrong was taking massive amounts of drugs, okay? Because there's this misconception that the more you take, the better you're going to be, right? So the more you take, the more you make, right? Like that, it just doesn't work that way, and it especially doesn't work that way in endurance sports.
It's definitely like the more you take, the more you take.
Right, exactly.
This is generally the path it goes down.
And so what some of the stuff that was starting to come out was the fact that Lance Armstrong was passing tests, okay, not because he was clean, all right, but because he was undergoing blood transfusions in an RV in the Alps. Okay, so it's like he's not even going to attempt to mask that he's doing drugs. He's just going to get tipped off that he has a drug test, or he's just going to lock himself in his RV and not let the testers in until his blood transfusion is complete. Okay, because at the end of the day, it kind of serves two purposes. One, if your hematocrit is getting really high, the way to get that hematocrit down is to donate blood, right? That's how your body naturally reset the cycle. So it would be like he would have, a ride, he would have EPO, testosterone, all the other shit in his system. He would know that he was going to have a test, and he was going to essentially dump his blood.
Switch it out.
Exactly. And so, and I'm not 100% sure on all the tests, because relatively speaking, if you're going to test for basically everything but EPO, you want to do a urine test, not a blood test, because a urine test is just going to give you a lot more information than a blood test will, because your blood is extremely efficient at self-regulating, right? So it'll try to get these things back into balance.
Homeostasis.
The old homeostasis.
When you're homeostasis.
Right. So then I thought, well, shit. So, and this it's like one thought leading to one thought and then leading to more thoughts, right? So I'm like, okay, well, so Lance is he's gonna swap out his blood. Well, how's he gonna account for the testosterone or things like that? And so then I started looking into that. All right. And it comes to find out the drugs used with Barry Bonds, Lance Armstrong, some of the elite track and field, even more recently in with the Russia doping scandal, like Ilya Ilyan's positive test, the drugs are all really basic. Okay, so it's not this idea that you have this mad chemist working in a lab that's just cooking up things that are undetectable. Now, that being said, the cheating will always be ahead of the testing. Always. Like you're not going to change that.
Which is why the retro testing has been really so effective.
Exactly. So if they hold on to those samples longer, they can go back and test it when it comes to light what these things are. So when you do a urine test, basically they have to test for the drugs that they're testing for that they know that could be taken for performance enhancing capabilities,
as well as
all the derivatives. Okay, so they're looking for byproducts of those drugs and metabolites and shit like that. On a real simple level, they would if they were taking a blood test before, right? They would just draw your blood and they would look at your testosterone levels. Okay, and then there would be this balance between testosterone and epitestosterone. Okay, well, epitestosterone really has no effect in the body, and so people don't inject epitestosterone. However, there is a normal ratio of testosterone to epitestosterone. Okay, and within WADA and how they like the Olympics controls doping is they would just look for a certain ratio. Okay, and the ratio was like, because it varies so much, like human to human, it was like 6-1 or 10-1. Okay, something like that. So there was like a pretty significant sliding scale. And what they found out is there's dudes that would be testing like 1,000-1 or like some crazy shit like that, 100-1.
You might be taking too much.
Yeah, exactly.
But then once again, the more you take, the more you take.
Right, exactly. So then that led me to the idea of who in the hell is advising these guys and girls to take these drugs? What are their qualifications, and what mechanisms are they even like putting into play to keep their athletes safe? Are they trying to keep them safe? Are they looking at any sort of long-term health risks? Do they give a shit? And the resounding answer is nobody gives a shit. And it's kind of hard on two levels. Okay, so we got to flesh this out a little bit. The athletes, there was a survey a while back where they interviewed asked randomly so many athletes, like, if you could take performance enhancing drugs, guarantee yourself a gold medal, and then die 5 years later, would you do it? And it was like 50-50. It wasn't 100%, but it was like pretty high amount of people were like, yeah, I'd die to like win my sport. But then the other side of the coin are the distributors and the people that are making the drugs. Okay, so when I first heard of Victor Conti and Balco, right, it was this laboratory in the San Francisco Bay Area where this genius is just like making all this exotic shit, and every professional athlete's going there.
You would expect like a secret layer.
It couldn't be farther from the truth. Victor Conti's not a fucking scientist. He's a dipshit. He was really nothing more than a sleazy salesman. I don't think he had any background whatsoever. I'm not even sure he went to college, but he didn't have any background whatsoever in physiology. He didn't really know shit about track and field or baseball or anything like that. And he was essentially trying to just make money selling supplements, ZMA or whatever. And he realized if he could get some athletes some drugs, growth hormone tests, the cream, the clear, whatever the fuck you want to call it,
more money.
That they would do better. They would then wear his supplement. I think it was ZMA, to be honest. I think he was like the first person to do ZMA.
Really?
They would like wear his shit and say that the ZMA was causing all the gains, and they would go on and win. He'd sell more supplements, and then he would just be essentially supplying them with the stuff. And So then it begs into question, well, okay, how or where do you get steroids? Okay. And then, and again, this is just like layers of questioning that I had as an undergrad and graduate student, and I still have some today. Like I'll still research stuff and just to know what's going on.
Just type in the Google. Where do you get steroids?
Google's such a great place to start. You got to go darknet to really get the good answers.
Do you even know? Can you Google to get to the darknet?
No, that defeats the whole point of the darknet. Like if everybody can Google to the darknet, what's the point? Everybody knows you go to Reddit to get to the darknet.
Is that like the gateway?
Yeah, exactly.
All right then.
I believe on the underground it's called A Ticket to Aruba.
Reddit would probably. They're gonna probably get on the darknet and shut us down. So.
Hopefully. So then, okay, so this led to this well, where do steroids come from, right? Kind of like where do babies come from, but you start looking at the drugs that the athletes use, okay? And almost all of the drugs were made by legitimate companies that were trying to solve a problem. Muscle wasting in AIDS, muscle loss in cancer patients, general
diabetes.
Yeah, right.
Like you on insulin.
Diabetes.
I know where to find it.
We're shooting kids with growth hormones so they don't end up dwarfs, right? Like I'm confident my kids need that, by the way. They're midgets. But so there's all these drugs out there. Well, when you make a drug, okay, believe it or not, drug companies are not altruistic. They're out there to make money. So what do? They patent their shit and they get research done on it.
Breaking
news.
So news.
If you know a technical name for a drug, right? If you know that D-ball isn't the technical name, right? You can
that test.
Yeah, give me some tests, right? If you can type in an actual drug name through the U.S. Patent Office, you'll find the patent on the drug.
Yeah.
Most drugs by law have to have 2 patents, okay? And then it will inevitably link you to the research studies that were done to prove whatever they were wanting to prove. Okay, well, when you go to the research, in a research paper, it tells you how to make it. Okay, and then some criminal out there is hey, I can just rip this off, brew it up in my mom's basement, make it in my kitchen, and make a couple $100 a vial or whatever, however the hell it goes.
Sell it.
And so when you say it out loud, you're like, oh my God, that is crazy. There are people that have actually figured out how to make drugs in their basement. Let me remind you, listeners, that there are thousands of trailer parks where people are making meth daily, right? When people want to figure out how to make shit, it's not that hard.
Can we Google how many trailer parks are making meth?
I just offended a lot.
Maybe 1,000.
See, but I can talk about trailer parks. You know why?
Because you're from one?
Bada boom. So, but you get my point is it's things that are man-made. They're not complicated to recreate, especially once somebody gives you the blueprint, right? So I was like, oh wow, this is pretty eye-opening. If you want to make drugs, it's relatively easy. And so what happens is it's harder. The reason the drugs are always ahead of the test is because there's always new drugs on the market. There's always a new metabolite. There's always a new derivative. And it takes the testers a while to figure out what the drugs are that the athletes are using. Okay, because it's not feasible for WADA or USADA or one of those non-for-profits
right.
to come up with a test for every single drug on the market. And I don't remember. It's what you consider a mainstream drug now. I want to say it was maybe Winstrol or something like that. Something that's really been used in sports for a long time. Was created off a guy that used a 1939 patent, okay, for a drug to help cancer patients that just never materialized in the market, right? He just had certain criteria, sat there, dug through the patents, and found out what he was trying to make.
Found the one and made it.
Exactly. So then you ask yourself, all right, we got some guys making it, and some guys giving it, and what are the intentions and the qualifications of those people? Okay, so your average bro or broette that hangs out at LA Fitness or
Gold's Gym.
whatever,
Wherever.
which are great places to train. Okay, what do they have your health in their your long-term health and best interest? Is that their interest? Probably not.
I would say no. But,
Okay.
then again,
And
do the pharmaceutical companies. Maybe not. Being altruistic. Got to make that money. Right?
And do these guys know how any of this stuff works? Right? How does testosterone work? How does insulin work? How does growth hormone work? How do these things affect vital characteristics of your body? How do they affect your hemoglobin? There's just so much stuff. And the answer is they probably don't know. They probably just say, bro, this one gets you dense.
Right.
This one gets you big.
They're not looking past 5 years.
No. They're
trying to die young, leave a big coffin.
Right, exactly. So, and the problem, to me, and by the way, this concern of long-term health is not limited to the average bro. Like the dudes that are providing drugs for some elite athletes or whatever, they might just be CD dudes, right? Like, here's my opportunity to latch onto this famous guy. I'm going to give him some gear. I really don't know what it's going to do, but I'm going to hang out with him and I'm going to take his money. Good to go, right? Like, spoiler alert, there's bad people in the world. Okay, it's just the way it is. And so that's totally different from that kind of drug use and consumption where you have no idea the effect on your body is totally, like, for example, a lot of the baseball players during the steroid era were taking oral steroids because they thought it was safer and less harmful on your liver. And that's not how that works.
But if it's what the bros say,
yeah,
you might as well do it.
And so just like talking about some things like people aren't asking questions about when, and we've seen this in positive USA weightlifting, positive test for tren, okay? And everybody's like, oh my God, she was on tren. And speaking of one athlete or one individual, but they're not, like, to me, the question is like, who told you to do tren? And why, if you're going to do drugs, shouldn't you, Google something about it first?
You should Google it.
Right, so you're not even a good cheater, right? You're half-assing your cheating, okay? Because it's a well-known fact that tren is designed to stay in your system for a long time. The drug was made to keep meat on cattle while it shipped cross-country. And the cattle didn't have access to food. All right, so
and it worked.
It 100% worked. Again, drug made for agriculture. Right. It's like this stuff is not complex. It's like the stupidity in which it's used is the most amazing part. Okay, so it's so that's one level. Like you're just taking shit with no regard for what it does, how it's going to affect you, how it's going to affect your life long term, or even how it's going to affect you while you're cheating, okay? And then the other class is the Lance Armstrong class, okay? Guys that 100% knew of the mechanism that was going on, knew 100% of the health risk, and knew 100% of the potential reward, okay? That is a different scenario than an 18-year-old kid training at a local gym where he sees powerlifters who are juiced out of their gills or bodybuilders juiced out of their gills. And he thinks, if I take these drugs, I will beat that, right? Giving no credence to the sports science or the physiology that it actually takes to obtain a certain level of muscle mass and size and and the amount of time that it takes.
Well, they call it bro science, Dan.
So, those are two separate problems, right? And an 18-year-old kid an 18-year-old kid doesn't have a good idea of risk and reward. And that's part of the danger of it. And there's not a lot of people that are...
may be breaking news to some.
right. There are not a lot of people out there that are willing to talk about drugs openly and how they're used and the side effects and the discouragement. It's looked at like if you talk about drugs, you're telling people to do them, right? Like we talk about every other thing, well, you should be talking about all kinds of shit with your kids, but you're not going to talk about this one thing because you think it's going to like lead to them, doing drugs. If you tell them that, like, yeah, there are people in the world that take performance-enhancing drugs.
Well, it's like we covered the nutrition topic last time, and if somebody says I'm gonna eat 1,000 Eggo waffles today, and I'm gonna make some gains, but I'm still gonna lose some weight, you're going to probably tell them no, that is in fact not true, and you're going to educate them on why they shouldn't do that.
Correct.
But if you never address the drug problem or the fact that they exist, and the fact that even if they wildly got some, they would have no idea what to do with it.
Right.
Or the long-term dangers, which we've seen that play out with people that have taken too much, because, like if more is, like if some is good, more is better, right? Like the more you take, the more you take.
Right.
Then like they have like a long-term injury, or they have something where like they mess up their physiology so bad that they can never recover.
Sure.
And that's just that's just something that has to be lived with.
Sure.
But if it was a Lance Armstrong scenario where it was more systematic and it was more regulated, still wrong, then at least it wouldn't have maybe the long-term effects on their body.
To interject with a oh shit moment, there's a YouTuber video up of me and a couple other coaches. We were sent to work with Louis Simmons, who's no stranger to drugs. This
Right. Yeah.
publicly, openly admit that he's used drugs for like 6 years, whatever. But when I was there, this guy came in, and his color of purple. He was a purple man. I don't know if he was originally Caucasian or not.
Hello,
but he's a purple guy.
Did you bring me some?
And I was like, holy shit! Like this, and his neck veins were like this audio cord. And Louis Simmons asked him something to the effect of, what's your cycle look like? Something's not right. And he like lists more shit that I didn't even know what it was, right? And Louis Simmons goes, Jesus Christ, you're on way too much fucking shit. And at that moment, I was like, if Louis Simmons says you need to dial this drug thing back, you're probably at like some risk here. And then I got this question. So we've been talking, we had been talking with some of our members about doing this podcast and things like that. And just like part of the reason we do this is because it bounces ideas off of them, right? And we have some super smart dudes here. Let's give a shout out to Dr. Lauren Bertocci, but he trains here, and he is probably the most, of all the people I've been around, he probably knows the most about exercise physiology.
Yeah.
And he's been in endurance sports forever. He's recently in weightlifting. He knows a lot of shit.
He's had lots of students come through.
Lots of students.
Gone on to, have like crazy like academic pursuits and also research-based pursuits.
Yeah. And I believe his PhD was from Stanford. He either swam or played water polo.
He did swim back in the day.
Yeah.
He was a referee for water polo.
I did know that, and he's a master's weightlifter now. But anyway, he's a super smart guy. You can just bounce ideas off of him. And so we were kind of having this conversation. Like we wanted to talk about drugs, but make sure it wasn't like something we're like, yeah, you should do drugs, because we're not about that. And somebody said, well, what's the difference between performance-enhancing drugs and TRT? Okay, so we got another layer there. So testosterone replacement therapy.
Which is very common, especially in, males older than, 30, 35?
I'd say about 35.
Probably 35.
So there is a natural decrease in your testosterone as you age. Okay, now you got to understand the thing about research is it's really hard because there's a lot of mixed results research depending on who's funding the agenda, right? So that's kind of one of the tricky sides of research. But there's research that shows that having testosterone within this normal range, which I believe I should have looked this up, is between 300 and 1,000 or 300
I
or
want to say that's
1,200,
correct again.
something like that. So this normal range, right? And I'll give you some numbers and some ideas because this will, I got another disgusting story. But there's like this normal range of testosterone in adult males that, let's say, it goes from 300 to 1,000. All right, so if you go into a testosterone replacement therapy, I don't know about this or not, but they do a blood test, right? And so they get an idea of how much testosterone you have, how much free testosterone, and maybe some other shit. I'm not 100% sure on what tests are done. I do know, this goes back to the hematocrit question, I do know that when you give blood or when you go back to retest form, they check your hematocrit, and this is the idea that the doctors are monitoring the risk things, right? And TRT is really meant to be for your people that are 35 and older, around that range, that just want to have a normal amount of testosterone.
Right.
So they can be productive and they can move around and they can not feel like shit. It's not really designed to have a performance enhancing effect. Okay, now, obviously, if you get your testosterone up to the higher end of the spectrum, you're going to feel better. You're probably going to gain some muscles and like feel good. Okay, but this is not guys that are going on the extreme. So, for example, in one of these sports performance enhancing drug cases, they had a sprinter who was taking, let me get this right, 2,000 milligrams of testosterone at least twice a week. Okay? So
that's a little bit above normal.
Yes, and I'm not. I'll have to be. I can't say this is 100% guarantee. I'm just going to I'll do some things with my hands here. But let's say that the average dose of a TRT person is 200 milligrams. Okay, and 200 milligrams, depending on the dilution of whatever shit you're taking, whatever testosterone, is probably like if you think of a syringe, it goes 1 to 10. Okay, so 200 milligrams would be filled up from the syringe to the 1. Okay, so like this much. 2,000 would be the whole thing, the whole thing. Okay, and so this elite sprinter was injecting himself with this massive amount of stuff. Okay, now.
Sounds about right.
Okay, so just say it out loud, right? I'm going to take this much stuff and put it in this one spot of my body. Well, obviously, it doesn't just go in there and then start circulating all around your blood, right? Your blood has to circulate, right?
I mean, you think it would.
So, apparently, if you're dumb, you think that's what happens. And so basically, this guy is getting ready for, I don't know if it was, I want to say it was 2004, which was Athens, maybe 2008. And he basically had a cyst or a growth or some shit in his leg that had to be surgically removed because it was just a mass of testosterone fluid that had just sat there and didn't circulate around his body.
I bet that cyst was fucking jacked though.
You're right. So that's the difference between like a TRT and a performance enhancing drug. Like even though testosterone can be used in both scenarios, you have totally different implications for what we're talking about. And again, this goes back to my questions about the people that are giving the advice, even on the lead ins of performances. How dumb are you? Like you told a guy to put like that much. It's just not smart. And then you're the guy that's doing it, and you're like, this sounds like a good idea.
That's right. That's what a real friend would
and
shoot me up 10 times more.
And then the last one was that in the Barry Bonds deal, I think it was Barry Bonds. He said that he put the clear under his tongue with a needleless syringe. Okay, so he basically drank testosterone. Like, again, I'm like, I'm not sure that's how that works, but I gotta think it doesn't.
I mean,
Like,
It just doesn't sound appealing.
no,
Chase it with some like brandy, make it taste better.
it sounds like a absolutely terrible idea. So I know that we have like mostly adults listening to this podcast. I don't think we have any kids actually. We cuss too much. But the thing about it is you have to not be afraid to ask the questions, right? And you have to not be afraid to ask like, what is a performance enhancing drug? What's its effect? What's its negative side effect? And you have to think about those things and listen. Like, knowledge is knowledge, right? And you have, like, I can learn a lot about how to make a nuclear bomb. That doesn't mean I'm going to go make a nuclear bomb. Maybe I just want to know about a nuclear bomb.
I don't know if I'd say that on the internet, man.
Yeah, that's right, darknet. But once you give somebody information and knowledge, it's theirs. They own it, and then they have to decide what they want to do with it. You don't give them information and then force them to make a decision, right? Like, people make the decisions they make. I've never and will never tell an athlete to do performance-enhancing drugs. I've been asked numerous times, and I always say I don't think you should do it. Always. I've said that. And that's just because that's what I personally believe, right? And then whether or not they take that advice, I can't, like, control. You don't know what's happening in somebody's bathroom or bedroom or whatever. And so you can't, like...
Or do you want to?
Exactly. And it's they have to make those decisions. And you can't thump your chest and be like, we're a drug-free weightlifting team, right? There's plenty of guys out there on the internet that do that. Well, what happens when one of your athletes tests positive? Because you don't know what they're doing.
Doesn't look so good.
Doesn't look so good, does it? And so you can never, like the Robles thing, right? Like, her coach probably didn't know she was doing drugs. Like, you just don't know. I mean, I know that her current coach, Tim Swords, he's not a proponent of drugs. He wasn't coaching her at the time. But, like, what if he was? He would have no way to know, right? And so that's kind of the point of, like, once you give them that knowledge and that information, it's up to them to decide, what they're going to do with it, right? And I think that that's, like, one of the more important things to understand. DG,
I think that's
closing thoughts, the future of drugs in sports and weightlifting.
I'd say
I will say this: if you, the one thing that's just interesting from, like, a physiology standpoint is if you look at every step along the way where we've had doping in sports. Like, this goes back to East Germany had, like, probably the most extreme abuse in terms of, like, forcing athletes to do shit, literally forcing athletes to have sex with other, like, high-performing athletes, just try to create super babies. Like, this is a no-shit type thing. Well, it actually happened.
Well, like, my mom was coached by an East German, or formerly East German, like, swimming coach. And, like, said this lady was unbelievably jacked, for one, and wanted all of them to be unbelievably jacked at 16 years old.
It's just not going to happen.
I'm like, okay, well.
Guess how you did that. But what it does is it kind of, even, like, the athletes that are on like that performance enhancing track, it's kind of like you're always looking into the future, because as humans evolve. Look at a 1960s NFL player versus a 2017 high school player.
They're a little more muscular.
They're the same size,
faster,
right? So we evolve and we get bigger. So, like, when you're thinking about sports, people are like, oh, if they quit doing drugs, the times would go down and the weights would go down. They wouldn't. They might flatten out for a while, but they would continue to go up because humans are going to evolve. They're always going to be becoming bigger and faster and stronger naturally.
We're going to know, we're going to know how to maximize performance as we get better, right? You can't, go smoke cigarettes and then go run a race. It just doesn't help you.
It does not.
We know more now.
Yeah. I mean, there was marathoners, like, in the early days of the marathon that would literally drink wine to stay hydrated. Terrible advice. Not only are you going to finish this marathon, well, back then, only like 3 guys would finish. You'd be like the least drunk of the 3, right?
Maybe the most drunk.
Yeah.
You never know.
Dan, so I think that in terms of performance-enhancing drugs, we don't need to really reiterate that we're just not we don't support that in any way. We just want people to, ask questions and be educated and, make good, healthy, informed decisions that have your long-term future in mind.
Yeah. The more you take, the more you take.
Exactly.
That's how it goes.
It's not always good.
No.
All right. Anything
All right, I
else,
think that's
Dan?
it.
All right.
That's a wrap.
We'll see you guys next week.